Tonight, Mississauga's fire department is running out of masks.
We have run into a critical shortage.
The N95s give us a quicker response.
Firefighters say the shortage could affect their ability to do their jobs. Plus,
We walk to this park all the time and now we stopped. It's just sick. I can't believe it.
the grisly discovery of 4 disfigured cats in a Vaughan Park prompts a police investigation. And the life and immense struggle of an Egyptian gay rights activist found dead in her Toronto apartment this weekend. Good evening, I'm Mike Wise. Mississauga's fire department says it is rapidly running out of N95 masks. Like many organizations, it is finding personal protective gear hard to come by during the COVID-19 pandemic. As Lauren Pelly tells us, thousands of masks are on order, but the clock is ticking to get them in time.
We have run into a critical shortage and no new supply available in the near future that we can see.
That's how the president of the Mississauga Firefighters Association describes the dwindling supply of N95 respirators.
A memo was issued late last week that directed staff to start wearing SCBA, our self-contained breathing apparatus, to medical calls. That was effective at 8 a.m. Monday morning.
Those breathing devices look like this, cumbersome and time-consuming to put on and weighing upwards of 30 pounds.
When you're doing CPR with a 30-pound pack on your back, it becomes a little bit more difficult.
This firefighter warns it could slow the force down on medical calls.
The N95s give us a quicker response.
Firefighters aren't the only workers who've raised concerns about access to personal protective equipment. And for months now, N95 masks in particular have been on short supply.
Provincial officials have been stocking up on PPE and pushing local manufacturers to ramp up production. Meanwhile, global supply chains remain backlogged for medical staff and first responders across North America.
We've worked with other fire departments that have gone through similar, so both Hamilton and Ottawa have gone through this several weeks ago.
Mississauga's fire chief says the province needs to share any stockpiled supplies.
We would ask that as we move into other phases of this pandemic and the government starts opening things up, that perhaps we can start to receive some allocation of the N95 masks.
Otherwise, this could be the tedious new normal in a field where every second counts. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
There's been a minor outbreak of COVID-19 at a Home Depot store in Richmond Hill. More than a dozen employees came down with the disease. Health officials say the risk to the public is low, but the outbreak is raising concerns and questions for Premier Ford about whether masks should be mandatory inside stores. Loretta Redekop has that story.
The Premier offering support after 14 employees at the Highway 7 and Yonge Street Home Depot tested positive for COVID-19.
I will be reaching out to the president of Home Depot Canada.
York Region Public Health says any customers possibly affected would have been in the store between May 30th and June 9th and had interactions with employees that lasted more than 10 minutes within 2 meters of distancing. The medical officer of health for the region says employee-to-customer transmission is rare.
The employee usually gets it from somebody in the community, then they bring it into the workplace, and then some of them take it to their homes.
Public Health is asking people to self-monitor for symptoms for 14 days and go for testing if they're concerned. Home Depot says it's provided face masks and PPE to all associates, and that they're required to wear masks when social distancing cannot be maintained or where it's required by law. It's one more case that raises the issue of whether masks should be mandatory. The mayor of Markham wants them to be required in enclosed indoor spaces.
I'm calling on the provincial government to make it mandatory to wear masks where physical distancing cannot be adhered to.
Doug Ford doesn't plan to go that far.
We want to work with the retailers. We don't want to force anyone to do anything. I highly, highly recommend when you go out, wear a face mask.
It's set to happen on Toronto Transit.
We are giving notice of our move to make face coverings mandatory on the TTC, and if approved, face coverings will be mandatory effective July 2nd.
but don't expect a fine in Ontario if you're not wearing one.
The police 14.5 million people would be very, very difficult. We just don't have the manpower.
Lorenda Radicop, CBC News, Toronto.
The federal government is extending the emergency benefit that's helping millions of people who've lost their jobs due to COVID-19. Prime Minister Trudeau says many Canadians are still struggling to find work even as the economy begins to reopen. So the government is extending the CERB benefit for another 8 weeks. That's provided applicants look for work and take jobs when it's reasonable to do so. Extending the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit was a demand from the NDP in exchange for its support of the minority Liberals in an upcoming confidence vote. And the closure of the Canada-US border is being extended. In an effort to stop the spread of the coronavirus, it will stay closed until at least the end of July. Canada and the U.S. reached an agreement back in March to temporarily close the border, only allowing commercial traffic and essential workers to cross. Last week, Ottawa announced some immediate family members separated by the restrictions will be allowed to go back and forth. York Regional Police are investigating a number of suspected animal cruelty incidents after 4 cats were found dead in a park in Woodbridge, all in the past month.
One of my neighbors, her cat was found here, mangled, and she had told me the next day. And we have a cat too. Our cat used to go outside, come right back, but ever since she told me, we're so afraid now. And we also have a dog. We walk to this park all the time, and now we stopped because this is like, it's sick. It's just sick. I can't believe it.
Police say the animals were found disfigured at Belair Way Park at Weston and Langstaff. Officials say their injuries don't appear to be from a predator or an accident, and they're urging pet owners not to leave their animals unattended outdoors and are asking anyone with information or video evidence to contact them. A Durham couple is asking for a review of an independent police report which cleared 2 officers in a confrontation that took place outside a hospital 2 years ago. Yesterday, their lawyer released video of the altercation. Now, surveillance video shows Livingston Jeffers and his wife, Amelia, leaving a hospital in Ajax. They had gone to the emergency room because she wasn't feeling well. A nurse follows them outside, and she is joined by a security guard, a doctor, and then 2 officers who were already nearby. There is a confrontation, but the video is too far away to tell exactly how that happened. The Jeffers family says it came out of nowhere, that they were given permission to leave the hospital and would return the next day. They say staff tried to stop them and wanted to admit Mrs. Jeffers on mental health grounds, and that's when police got involved and things got physical.
Hey, I seen you punch him.
Now, this eyewitness video shows police punching Mr. Jeffers. The person who shot it says a hospital staffer and Durham police forced him to delete it, but he'd already shared it with the couple's grandson. Durham police, meanwhile, allege it was Mr. Jeffers who attacked them, adding that not only did he resist arrest, he also tried to take one of the officer's guns. There is apparently body cam footage that shows this, but police are refusing to release it. That unseen video, was evidence in an independent review done by a former York police officer that cleared both Durham officers of wrongdoing, saying their actions were justified. The Jeffers have filed a civil suit against the police and the hospital and are asking for a review of that report.
Imagine you taking your elderly grandparents to a hospital because your grandmother wasn't feeling well, and then you come back and you see your grandfather arrested in handcuffs with trauma to the head, bruises, bleeding, unconscious with his head back on a chair. My grandparents need justice. We need justice.
Both Durham police and the hospital say they can't comment on the lawsuit or the family's allegations due to the litigation. Mexico has stopped sending temporary farm workers to Canada after 2 of them died from COVID-19 while working on farms in southwestern Ontario. The move comes as cases of the disease amongst migrant workers continues to rise. Jason Vail has the latest.
Most of the temporary foreign workers have arrived at greenhouse operations across Ontario, but it's the farms officials say will be the most impacted by the Mexican ban. As many as 5,000 workers from Mexico are being held back for now.
They essentially would not be able to harvest their crops, and that would be very disruptive to the Canadian food supply chain.
Ontario's Ministry of Labour is currently investigating the 2 migrant workers who died in Essex County. A 24-year-old died earlier this month and a 31-year-old in May.
We're going to make sure that we're following up not just with our partners around the world, but with Canadians to ensure that we know what happened.
Trudeau spoke with Mexico's president today, expressing his condolences and highlighting the important economic relationship. But until the Mexican government gets those answers, the temporary ban will remain in place.
We are looking that the conditions improved, that proper authorities find out what happened actually to that created this the spread of the virus that affected these 2 workers.
Since the pandemic began, provincial Labour officials have done 88 field visits across the province. Most are in Essex County, and overall, they say they were random. There were also complaints about sanitation and concerns over the lack of physical distancing. Part of the problem now is the lack of testing of migrant workers. In Essex County, only about 700 of the more than 8,000 workers have been tested for COVID-19.
We just have to get everyone over and get them tested, as many as possible. I understand the farmers are nervous, the workers are nervous.
And part of that nervousness is the fear of not being paid if migrant workers are forced to self-isolate for 2 weeks, something at least one farm operator in Leamington is vowing to take action on.
We at Highline have identified that as a possible disincentive to identify that they have symptoms or to be comfortable working or being off work because they're not making money. So we've pledged to all of our employees that we will make sure that they're made whole financially.
And he's asking other operators to acknowledge the problem and address it head on to ensure they're doing everything they can to stop COVID-19 from continuing to rip through the agriculture sector. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
With about a week to go until school ramps up for the summer, parents have mixed feelings about how distance learning went for their kids. Well, some say they got the support they needed over these past 3 months. Others say keeping up has been a challenge and that teachers lack the resources they needed. Farah Morali has more.
It's recess at the McDonald family home, an outdoor break from the indoor classroom. Love you. The last few months have been a bit of a balancing act for mom Shirlene McDonald.
It's all about determination, and it's hard. It's so hard. I have five daughters, but it's a lot of work, and it's frustrating at times because you're older. You're like, you see your kids' algebra, you're like, this is like learning a new language.
But McDonald says with support from the school, they've made it work.
My experience that I have so far with the teachers have been really good. They check in.
How are you guys doing?
Melissa Tierin struggled to balance her own work with teaching initially, but says her kids' teachers helped her come up with a plan.
It's been really good that way. I haven't felt at all like we've been kind of left to our own devices.
That's not everyone's story, though.
He has been given assignments by his very hardworking and solicitous teacher, but there's very little follow-up or pressure on him to make sure he does those assignments.
Russell Smith is the father of a 10-year-old in the TDSB.
There hasn't been a real will, I think, expressed on the part of the school board towards all their teachers to enforce learning and to make it clear that it's important.
Under provincial rules, student grades can't be lowered by online assignments. So how much of an effort have boards made to make sure they're reaching all students? CBC Toronto asked all 12 GTA boards, public, Catholic, English and French, how they're tracking students' online learning. 2/3 said they didn't collect exact numbers. Of the boards that did, York's Catholic District School Board says its analytics show it's reached 98% of its students through online learning. The York Public Board says as of mid-April, more than 99% of families and students had contact with their teachers.
Every single board in Ontario should know who they're reaching, who they're not reaching, and what they're going to do about it.
Wow, good job!
But the possibility of distance learning continuing through the fall to make it better will be of increasing importance. Whatever September looks like, McDonald is confident her kids will adjust.
My kids are pretty resilient. They'll be okay. Kids are able to bunk back, you know, and like trampolines.
Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
Here we were today, sunshine, temperatures back towards seasonal. I'm meteorologist Colette Kennedy. If you like today, well, now we're going to see things heating up a little further. I'll tell you about those warming temperatures coming up after the break.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. It's hard to stop a train.
Time to check in on the weather forecast with meteorologist Colette Kennedy. And Colette, life is complicated. Sometimes your forecast shouldn't be.
It's nice for a change to have somewhere where we can just kind of take a breather and count on things being a little bit quieter. And we are just sailing through this week with these kinds of conditions where the only thing that's really changing is that the temperatures are going up and each day it's getting a little bit warmer. So the dry conditions prevail as we head a little deeper into this week. Yes, those temperatures climbing and maybe the humidity increasing a little bit as we go towards not only the weekend, but the first official day of summer that is coming to us as we head towards Saturday. Now, just thought we'd have a look at the month of June in general for Toronto, taking this from Pearson. If we take a 30-year average, and what we would see, just over 70 millimeters of rain would be typical. This month so far, well, we're just around 43 millimeters of rain, and yet we know that we're not going to be seeing any over the next few days. So we have this dry period. It does put a little bit of, an emphasis on us having to use the sprinklers and water the lawns, water the gardens, and that kind of thing. But it is kind of nice to have this spell where we get to just count on having sunny days. Daytime highs today, pretty close to seasonal as we look across southern and eastern Ontario. A little bit above for the nation's capital, with Ottawa being at 27. Windsor 26, that's pretty close to seasonal for you guys there. It is this dominant ridge of high pressure in place, hanging around through the week, and that's very stable. This air mass just to the south of us in the U.S., it's kind of blocking what's happening there. They're looking at some areas getting some very heavy rain, but it's keeping us really protected here through the lower Great Lakes. In fact, through the Great Lakes, period. Now, as we go towards Thursday, you can see some of these pop-up showers into New York State wanting to push towards the lower portions of the Golden Horseshoe, possibility towards St. Catharines. You could see something showing up there, but into Toronto, into the GTA, over towards southwestern Ontario, not putting anything through here. Overnight into southwestern Ontario for your temperatures. You see what your lows are looking like here? And these are pretty close to seasonal. And now your daytime highs, this is that trend where things are going up and getting warmer. So highs tomorrow creeping closer to 30 degrees. They're creeping up to tomorrow in the GTA. Tonight it's comfortable sleeping weather again. But this is what we're looking at for tomorrow with that sunshine, 26, 27 degrees for those daytime highs. Thursday getting close to 30 degrees. By Friday, we're going to see those temperatures up around 30. And the humidity starting to come up a little bit. And there it is, Mike. Saturday, the first official day of summer coming our way.
I know it's the first official day, but it's already feeling like summer. Thanks, Colette.
It sure is.
Well, after the break, the life of an LGBT activist cut tragically short. Sarah Hijazi sought asylum in Canada after she was arrested and tortured in Egypt. She died on Saturday. We'll bring you her story when... It was a simple but powerful act. 3 years ago at a concert in Egypt, Sarah Hijazi held up a rainbow flag. She was later tortured and jailed by Egyptian authorities, that experience leaving her traumatized and ultimately causing her to flee to Toronto, where this past weekend she died by suicide. Our Chris Glover has her story.
The power of this image is likely lost on many Canadians. A lesbian photographed at a Cairo concert in 2017 waving the rainbow flag, a symbol of gay equality. But for it, Sarah Hijazi was arrested by Egyptian security forces, interrogated, tortured, and imprisoned.
My mental health was disaster. It's like I'm like zombie. I don't understand what's going on.
Hijazi sat down with CBC News in 2018. Convicted in her country of inciting debauchery, international officials helped her flee her beloved Egypt. Toronto was safe for her, but she desperately missed her family.
I was not anyone here, just alone, completely alone.
Haunted by her past, she suffered with anxiety, panic attacks, and had attempted suicide. Friends say Saturday she took her own life. Hijazi was imprisoned in Egypt alongside one of her best friends, Ahmed Allah. He also raised the rainbow flag at that concert and fled to Toronto with Hijazi.
For everyone who needs help and support, Sarah was the most kind and the most supportive person you might ever see. She was fighting a lot, but she just lost her energy.
During our 2018 interview, Hijazi says in Arabic she wants the focus not on herself, but on the hundreds of thousands jailed for opinions or sexual orientation.
The only thing that we can do to Sarah is to complete what she did, to still asking the Egyptian government to stop arresting LGBT people, to stop torture people in jail, to stop what they do. We just need to live as any human being. That's our right. We are not asking for too much.
Toronto's Rainbow Railroad helped Hijazi and 11 others get out of Egypt in 2017.
It's hard to know that she was struggling. We had conversations about that struggle. And it just highlights the need for additional mental health supports for not just newcomers, but many people in Canada.
The lead singer of the Lebanese band whose concert Hijazi was photographed at with the pride flag just released a song quoting one of Hijazi's previous posts. In Arabic, he sings, "I want the sky, I don't want the earth. The sky is more beautiful than the earth." Sarah Hijazi was 30 years old. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
A vigil is being planned to honor Sarah Hijazi at Christie Pitts this Friday night. Well, before we go, tomorrow on The Current, Raptors president Masai Ujiri will speak with Matt Galloway about outreach he's doing with elementary students as part of International Day of the African Child. He's also speaking out about racial discrimination and social justice. You can hear that tomorrow starting around 8:35 on CBC Radio 1. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night.